So this morning we are doing the You Are a Creative module, and I've dropped a few reflection questions in the group chat that we're going to have a little bit of a chat about today. But first, as always, let's ground in and just start to feel into our bodies. We're going to have Luna yelling out, "Mum, Mum." She's going to add her 2 cents to the talk. She's fierce and the boss of everybody. And a lot of the things that we as women have grown up with in second guessing ourselves and, feeling not good enough, I feel like she's not going to have any of that. She's like, I am here. All right, so just take a few moments to ground down and feel your body. Breathe into your body. Breathe into your beautiful body. Find the very edges of this vehicle that you call home. And for the most part, just make sure that you are fully occupying. Could I possibly occupy more of this beautiful body of mine? Could I animate it with my breath and my loving attention? Can you feel the breath moving into the very tips of your toes, your knees, the very most posterior curve of your buttocks, your kidneys, the tips of your shoulder blades, fingertips, the inner elbows, the foremost curve of your shoulder, the tip of your ear, the back top part of your head. Just find these corners of your body that you might be likely to not get right into. If you think of your home, we think of ourselves as being familiar with our home, these walls that we live in, but there will be corners of your house that you don't give your attention to. We can say we know them, but are we really fully occupying that part of our home? Or is it a place that's gathering dust and where energy is stagnant because it misses out on our attention, those places where we just shove things? And so using this analogy, just find those places in your body that perhaps you don't give as much attention to. In your rational mind, you're like, of course they're there. Of course I pay attention to them. Of course I'm there. But there will be areas that energy is a little more stagnant. There isn't quite as much flow. And just find them and let your breath just start that movement and that cycling of energy and awareness in those parts of your body. And then we start to add this particular pattern of breath work that we work with. So breathing in from the base of the perineum, filling up the entire vehicle, fill up belly, back body, side body, right up, and feel simultaneously from the crown of your head to the base of the perineum, and hold the tension of fullness. Practice holding more of whatever is within your experience. Let that physically open up your body, cause you to rise up and get bigger. And as you expand to as much as you possibly can, just feel that expansion and hold it for a few moments and then gently release. And we'll take a few more breaths like that. Big breath in. Let it lengthen your spine, lift you up taller. Maybe taking another sip of air. Feel the fullness. whatever is within your experience, just hold it, let it be there. Practice that act of holding and exhale, slow exhale. Good, 3 more breaths. And you can let there be a bit of power to this inhalation. Hold at the top. Maybe even take in a little bit more. Can I hold a little bit more within me? You're practicing the art of increasing your capacity to hold life and to hold whatever is, whether it's joy, frustration, and then soft exhale, 2 more in your own time. For some of us, we can hold sorrow or we can hold anger much more skillfully than we can hold joy. So what is it that you need to practice holding? What is it that it would be beneficial for you to practice holding? What would feel nurturing to practice holding? What are you accustomed to holding? And can you put that down and perhaps pick up something else and work on increasing your capacity to hold that and get more skillful in holding that? And not that there's any one emotion that's better or worse to hold, but we want to be able to hold them all with as much reverence, with as much acceptance, and with as much love. Good. And then you can just let that breath slip away after your next exhale and just stay in your body, in your heart, as I read our Wool Manifesto. And just staying connected and letting these words just fall into your cells, soak into your cells. As we remind ourselves that remembrance is a circle of safety, connection, kinship, sacred tending, and love. We come together to speak and to listen, to hold and be held, and we do so with a deep commitment to open-heartedness, truth, self-responsibility, and loving intentions towards ourselves and others. We acknowledge and honor the traditional and sovereign custodians and their unbroken and ongoing connection to land, water, sky, and spirit. Through our heartfelt recognition, we plant the seeds of returning to our own ancestral heritage of reciprocal relationship and tending to the earth. We embark on this journey not to arrive at a final destination, but instead as an apprenticeship of how to walk the path. We are a powerful circle of women who trust there is enough time for us to slow down, get present, listen to ourselves, discern what is true for us whilst building our courage and capacity to follow it. We know the medicine the world needs right now is found in women returning to a regulated, unrushed relationship with themselves and the living world around them, founded on love, truth, courage, and creativity. As women of remembrance and reclamation, we trust ourselves and our process implicitly. We tend ourselves and our nervous systems, our families, our communities, and of course, the land on which we walk. We trust our medicine because we are quiet enough to hear our deep intrinsic wisdom, humble enough to listen for our own unique song, and bold enough to sing it in harmony with the great song of this world. Even when it's tough, because we will only create a life we can truly belong to. We are committed to living lives built on truth that feel like a full heart and a welcome home, no matter how big or small they may appear on the outside. We are stewarding true eldership, no matter our age, and we are committed to open-hearted, interconnected, and regenerative living as we show others how to walk the path through both our humble and bold embodiment, and so it is. All right, as you are ready, you can slowly come back. All right. So yesterday I dropped some questions in our chat. I just want to get up what I put in. And I'd love to hear from you guys first. Like, what is your relationship to creativity? Do you see yourself as a creative being? And within that, like, what limitations do you put on that idea of creativity? Because I know that when I've asked this question in the past, people tend to really kind of confine a lot of what people says is, and if this is what you would say, that's fine, but I want to kind of preface this by adding this reflection so that you can add to it as you kind of give us what comes up for you. That, oh, I love being creative, but I'm not good at it. And so within that, it's very easy to hear that when people think of being creative, they're thinking of like painting or drawing or building something, like making a sculpture, or, you know, being a photographer or writing with words. And so when you think of being a creative being, do you really limit the way that you see that to this kind of conventional, traditional sense of creativity? Or do you see it a bit broader than that? Do you have a creative process? Do you know what it is? And how much do you feel like you are in a process of co-creation with something bigger than yourself? So there's a lot there, and you don't have to speak to all of them, and you don't have to speak if you're not feeling it this morning. But I would just love to open the table up for us to kind of have a little chat about what comes up for us when we think of creativity in these ways. So would anybody like to share? You're sitting there going, Brooke's up. Yay, go Brooke.
I just had a quick skim through those questions and listened to you as I said them. So hopefully I can discuss them, but they are just really newly processing. But creative energy for me is just simply doing something that is really like fulfilling and is part of a bigger picture. And I feel like currently, no, I feel like I haven't been since really becoming a mum. I feel like I don't really have that same relationship before. I've like even came to New Greg. I was always part of a bigger picture, did a lot of community stuff. So for me, that was always like co-creating. And that's when I found, I don't know, I felt like I was a lot more myself back then. So even before that, though, if we were talking about like, yes, the painting and the doing those sorts of creative things, I used to do a lot of that sort of stuff when I was younger. But because I came up against some challenges, I think it just, I just slowly fell away from it, to be honest. What does it, sorry, do you want to prompt me with some more of the questions, Kel? Because I'm just processing them. Yeah, that's my current relationship with it. Do I limit viewing it in the traditional sense? No, like I don't. I just don't feel like I make enough time for creativity. I feel like I'm limited because I don't, for me personally, like for me to get the best out of creation, I feel like it's a bit of a journey that I go on myself. I don't think it's something I would bring my husband and my daughter along for. And that, I guess that's limiting it in some ways. But yeah, generally, I don't know. Yeah, that's where I'm at with that sort of stuff at the moment. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I totally get it. And I think that just something that comes to mind that I hadn't thought to speak about, but I want to mention it because I've thought about it as you were speaking, was it would be really interesting to look at our relationship to creativity as we redefine ourselves through the different stages of womanhood. So like as the maiden, and then as the mother, whether we actually have human children or not, but as we move into a different stage of life where we kind of step into the frequency of just like that next stage of life. And I wish there was another word that they used for it, like as opposed to just mother, because like I know that we've got women in this circle, 3 women, I believe, that definitely not in their maiden stage, but not mothers. But there is a different stage that comes through that is, we're not a maiden anymore. And I know that I've definitely felt like that before I had children, that I was no longer a maiden because I was older than I think a lot of women around me were when they became mothers. I wish there was another word there. Maybe there is. But redefining our relationship to creativity as we move into these different stages of life. And then once we become Marga, and then once we become Crone, like, is there a different process for it? I don't know. But I think that, it definitely is something that has come up. I really relate to that transition and that kind of like, whoa, how do I readjust my relationship to things now that I'm in a different stage of life? So yeah, I really relate to that. Thank you, Brooke. Anybody else?
Yes. I think that my relationship to the word, or like the relationship to actually describing myself as a creative, has changed, because I think I've realized more now in this mother, or whatever this is, that putting labels on things isn't, I don't know, what's the word? Like, I suppose that whole imposter syndrome when you think of being a creative or being an artist, it's like, when do you go from being someone who's creative to actually being able to say, I'm an artist, or I'm this, or I'm that, and actually having a label? I think that my relationship to creativity, I was homeschooled on a farm with very little, like, we never saw any other kids. It was just me and my sister, and she was 3 years older, so she didn't really, she didn't really want to play with me. So I spent a lot of my childhood in my mind, like in my imagination, creating worlds, creating games, riding horses, but really I wasn't riding a horse on a farm. I was riding a horse into battle, or I was riding, I was a fairy, like those sorts of like creative processes in my head. And to be honest, that's never stopped. We also, mum and dad were entertainers, so we used to travel a lot. We used to drive for like 9 hours in the car. And as a kid, that, like, there's no iPads, there's no the distractors that we have today, weren't there then. So again, you'd spend 9 hours like cooped up in a box, but I was never there. I was always somewhere else, doing something else, being something else. And I think that I think we all have that, but I think that now in my current life is still happening. So it's very rare. Like, obviously I'm here and I'm present and I'm in the moment, but if I'm never bored.
What was that?
I'm never bored, because if I have any moment where nothing is happening, there's always something happening in my head. And I think that when you start realizing the creativity that you have just in small moments where you don't actually have to be doing anything to be creating, it's all sort of happening around you. The second question, do you limit yourself to viewing creativity only in a traditional sense? I think maybe I used to categorize things, like to be someone who is creative is to be someone who makes things creatively. But I was trying to remember the quote from Helena Bonham Carter. Have you heard what she said? And I actually got it up. I think everything in life is art. What you do, how you dress, the way you love someone, how you talk, your smile, your personality, what you believe in, all of your dreams, the way you drink your tea, how you decorate your house or party, your grocery list, the food you make, how you're writing books, and the way you feel. So life is art. And I think that's I resonate with that. And in that instance, not at all do I limit my thought of what being creative is. because, you know, even when you get up in the morning and I open my wardrobe, and my husband will attest to this, normally I put on 4 outfits before I settle in one, because while I can wear everything, I have to wait for it to click into how I'm feeling on a certain day. And that's all part of
Yes.
creating myself for the day and how I feel. So, yes.
Yeah, my cells all tingle when you read out that quote, and I have heard that quote, but I didn't make the connection with who had said it, and what it was in that moment. But yeah, like that is artistry, and that is, I think, true creativity. And for me, I really believe that we could look at somebody's work of art like they do a painting, but they might not necessarily be living creatively. They might not be necessarily centered or rooted in their artistry as a human being.
Yeah.
And that quote right there really speaks to what we're talking about this morning. So thank you. Kathy, would you like to share? Thank you, Becky.
I'll second that quote is just amazing. I probably have been stuck in the mindset that creativity is about painting, sculpture, music, whatever in the past. And if you haven't got any of those, then you're not creative. That's probably how that was my mindset for years. And partly due to assigned roles in my family, my youngest sister was the consummate creative, like very, very good at painting, very good at all the things that go along with that. Oddly enough, she's completely abandoned that later in life due to issues that she has. So that's someone who's not centered in their artistry. That's exactly what you've just said, Kel. So someone who has that potential but is not centered. So anything that she might create now is not coming from that artistic part of her. But I'm really interested in sort of knowing more about or really embodying creativity in a broad sense. Even as you say, like this cup of tea that I made, it's exactly how I like it. No one else will probably like it like this. It's a very odd way of making tea, but I love it. So that's my creativity. In looking at the prompts that you sent us, I was led to think of, I know I mentioned I've had tendonitis in this wrist, and I haven't been able to go to yoga for a while because I just can't, I haven't been able to lean on it. And I went back this week and I had to be extremely creative in how I modified my practice. And that was all about me, really. And I told the teacher, I said, look, I'm not going to be able to do certain things. And she said, that's okay, you do you. And that's the essence of creativity in a way as well.
Totally.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I love the idea of exploring creativity in the simplest of senses. What you wear, what you eat. Even as I said, going to the beach this morning to have my coffee, which is a very usual thing for me, then trying to start the car and thinking, oh God, but then thinking, all right, what am I going to create right now? I can sit here in the car and create a moment of, holy shit, I hate having a car. It's a stupid piece of machinery. I wish I could walk everywhere. Or just think, well, hey, it's a beautiful day. There's surf here. There's the beach. I've got the NRMA, wonderful modern conveniences. What can I create right in this moment? And I did actually create quite a lovely moment and said hello to a few people, played with the dog. It was great.
Yeah, beautiful.
So, yeah, I'm interested in that side of it. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think that's a nice segue because, you know, like if we think about the tapestry of our life or the work of our life, like we cannot, what's the word? Choose or control necessarily the mediums that we are given, the canvas that we are given, nor the tools or the brushes or the types of paint that are given to us, if we use this as a metaphor, in our lives. We can't control these circumstances, but we can start to tap into this place of being responsive and being in relationship so that we can creatively respond to whatever we're given. And I believe that we all have whatever this like canvas is that we've been given, whatever these tools and these, you know, creative mediums that have been put before us have been given to us. We can all turn our lives into a work of art that feels like this true and unique expression for us. And that is a beautiful thing. But for most of us, we've grown up being taught that, you know, if we stay with this metaphor that we've got this picture that somebody has drawn out for us and you've got to color it in and you're not allowed to go outside the lines. And so a lot of us are really, or that we've got to draw things so that they look like something, you know, like this idea of, actually saw this as quite a side note, but just that these beautiful abstract paintings were found that were, I wish I could remember the artist's name, by this woman that had done these most amazing abstract artworks before abstract art had been invented. And so she was actually somebody that was doing this incredible abstract art before anybody else was done it, but they were just hiding in this like underneath somebody's house, probably because this woman was like, nobody will ever see the value in these artworks because that wasn't done at that time. And yet me and also so many people that I could see reading about this work were just like, oh my goodness, these are the most beautiful works of art that I've ever seen. And so I think that it's really important to remember that our life is our own. And one of my friends uses a beautiful metaphor for the work of our life. And if we think of our life like a tapestry, like one of those big, beautiful tapestries, and that when you step back from these beautiful tapestries, they look incredible, and the detail, and like you go into, if you zoom in, there's like light and there's dark, and there's so much intricacy in the way that the tapestry is created. But if you turn the tapestry over, like particularly where these little bits of like real accent, and like from where they've done shadow and light and little kind of intricate bits of working, there's big knots up the back because they're using all different pieces of thread and bringing them together. And so we think of, on the surface, it looks so beautiful. And when we zoom out and we look at it as a whole, it's like these plays of shadow and light in intricacy that we don't even notice when we're looking back, like when we're zoomed out, but they're actually what give the tapestry its depth. But if we look behind and under the surface, there is mess there. And so it's I constantly go back to this metaphor because I think it's really easy to feel like if things don't look perfect, that we're doing it wrong or that we're somehow broken. But remembering that some of the most beautiful tapestries, if we look behind the curtain, there's messy and they're knotted and they're, you know. And so we are kind of the same in our humanness, in our beautiful humanness. So I just want to check in. Let me take a moment to see where we want to start with this. So I think we're clear, like that quote that Becky read from Helen Bonham Carter, was it? That's who said it, you said? Is such a beautiful starting point, because I really want us to move away from this idea that creativity is limited to sculpture or music or painting or writing or poetry or anything like that. It is in everything that we do. And I think that can really start to open us up, because it's really easy to feel like we don't have time for creativity. And as you mentioned, Brooke, becoming a mother, it can fall away. But one of the biggest shifts in my relationship to creativity has been like, it can be in the way that I clean the house. It can be in the way that I bring together meals for the household, and the way that I manage to balance the different roles that I play in my life, and the way that I pull together a program, and the way that I make a medicine. And I use this term medicinal artistry because I believe that when we are truly creating and responding to our lives from a place of being centered within our own resonance and with our own frequency, then as that moves through us, it is medicinal to not only us, but to everybody who is around us. Because we're creating, like we say in our War Manifesto, we're creating a life that we can truly belong to. And so really this idea of creativity is, it's about, you know, consciously creating and responding to our life in a way that we are, you know, with our intention and our actions and our energy, we are, you know, really building this life that we can look around and be like, oh, this is for me. This is for me. And this inspires me. And it, you know, like, it's not the way that I exactly pictured, but I have played, because it's the other part of it. The other part that I mentioned is that how much do you kind of really hold tight that things have got to be a certain way, or do you engage in the process of co-creation with something bigger than yourself? And so within this idea of consciously creating our lives, we've also got to hold the balance, that feminine balance of understanding that it is, we are giving over to something bigger than ourselves, and we are in communication with something bigger than ourselves. And it's just like, you know, in the act of giving birth to a baby, you know, we are creating a human life form. But this is, we can use this analogy to any aspect of creation that we're engaged with. But when we, you know, we can help mold and shape these young people, we can have our intentions for our birth plan and everything, but essentially there is another being coming through us. And so we haven't got complete control. And if we hold on tight to our idea of how we want things to go, things often don't go as well, like they don't go as well as they could. But when we allow, like when we have our intentions, but we hold them in an open hand, and we engage in the process from a place of co-creating and understanding that there is somebody bigger, there is something bigger than ourselves involved in this, as well as other people, we're consciously creating our lives with all of the people around us. And so working to choose those people that we invite onto our canvas in order to like create something that feels really aligned. This is our work, and it's not easy, but it is a beautiful, beautiful thing. The more that we engage in this energetic conversation between us and the world and allow our creativity to flow forth from that place. So let me just check my notes. I just want to see where I want to kind of start from here, because there's so much to talk about. And I've got a beautiful quote here, and I think this is from Julia Cameron. We are ourselves creations. We are meant to continue creativity by being creative ourselves. This is the God force extending itself through us. Creativity is God's gift to us, and using creativity is our gift back to God. And so I really think that relates to this in-breath, out-breath. Like, this is how we stay in communication with God. Like, this idea, whether you call it the divine, whether you call it source energy, whether you call it God, goddess, whatever you refer to this, you know, this pulsating energy that is all around us, that from which we came. You know, it's this in-breath, out-breath. And when we allow ourselves to become this channel for this creative process, this is when medicinal artistry really kind of takes shape. And now, one of the most important aspects of this medicinal artistry is being really centered in our process and being centered in like the stillness and the frequency of who we are at our core. And so what often happens, I know for many of us, is that like we could say that somebody is creative and they could be doing a lot of things, but if all of those things, you know, we talked about inside out living, and so we had a whole module on that. If all of these things that we are creating our lives are coming from a place of purely like looking at things in the outside world, looking at things that other people are doing, and yes, maybe being like, oh, I really like that, I'm going to do that, and like, but almost like, oh, shiny object, I'm going to create from this place, then we are potentially in danger of creating from a place that isn't deeply connected to our own inner source energy and this direct channel and this direct line. And so it's not necessarily medicinal in nature. And so we want to start to really kind of be in relationship with whatever is coming through. So there's a few things that we are really like looking to kind of nurture in us in order to open ourselves up to responding creatively to the challenges and the situations of our lives. Because it's not just about creating beautiful things from a place of nothing or from a place of no kind of prompt, but it's also about the way that we respond to the challenges that we face. Like medicinal artistry is about like a situation presenting itself and how can I be in relationship with this situation, and something like, as I kind of don't feel the need to fix it straight away, if I resist that urge to get in this external kind of clenching energy of I've just got to fix this now, but coming back into what is this happening for me? Like, what is this offering to me? Can I soften my areas of judgment and come into a state of play where I can open up to the possibility that this is a new medium presenting itself to me? I mean, if we stay with this metaphor of the different, you know, maybe we're always used to using watercolors, and all of a sudden we're given clay and it feels so much more dense and it feels so much more heavy than the medium that we're used to working with. And so at first it feels like a real problem. It feels like something that we can't work with. It feels like something that is meant to stifle us and stop our creativity and stop us feeling like we have any kind of any power of creation in our lives. But in fact, it was presented to us because it was like, no, this is something that we're inviting, universe or source energy is inviting you to shift your perspective and incorporate this into the great work of your life. But often we can't see that until we've moved through it. And the more that we can find ourselves in a state of like play, like, oh, okay, this is different. Can't say this is what I was hoping for. Oh, there's lots of feelings coming up here. I can sense a lot of contraction. I can sense a lot of resistance. And what happens is we often, you know, suffer twice by we feel the resistance and then we get angry at ourselves for the resistance, or we, you know, like we kind of clamp down on it because we've like decided no, and then we let that energy move into everything. So just one of the big things about creativity is that it comes from a place of play. So whenever there's this great book, and it's actually on homeschooling, have I got it here? Free to Learn, it's called. And the idea is it talks a lot about the state of play and how important being in a playful state is for creativity. And so, but also for problem solving. And so it refers to the fact that it gives lots of examples throughout this book and talks about a lot of other things as well. But it talks about the idea that when we are, like, if you have children in an art or a group of artists in an art class, sorry, I can't speak. I had one drink last night. We went out rock climbing and I had one drink beforehand. Maybe that's it, or maybe not. So if we invite people into a creative space and we kind of tell them to be creative, and there is an understanding that they're going to be assessed for their level of creativity, what they have found is it actually like really stomps on and dampens and decreases people's level of creativity, and kind of like decreases what we see come out of that work, or what we see come out of that situation. And simultaneously, they also discovered that if you give people a problem or a riddle to solve, that they did these tests where if you give people a lolly or you give them a little game to play first, then the levels of, or the ratios of being able to actually solve the problem went up exponentially, because even just sucking on a lolly put people in a little bit more of a kind of playful mood, and giving people like little games to play before moving them into the problem solving helped kind of move them into a different state of mind. And so it upped their power for creative thinking and seeing outside the box and being able to see what the situation was. Now, there's being able to solve the problem. And so we learn that, and we've all probably been in the situation where something has happened, we're feeling really stuck, and we can't see outside of our circumstances, and we can't see how we could possibly move beyond what is happening. Like everything just feels shitty and lost, and like we can't do anything. And then you go away and you do something else. Maybe you spend some time with friends, or you go and have some fun, or you just, go for a run or whatever it is. And then you can come back to the situation. All of a sudden it's like, oh, I can do this. I can do this. And so there's actually, like, this is a big part of the creative process. So it's a wonderful book called The Courage to Create. I can't actually think of the author at the moment, but he talks about this as a process. And I want to offer this. This is actually something that in Tantra, the Tantric lineage, we talk about the 5 acts of the divine, or the 5 powers of God, and it's the creative process. And so this is something that has been offered to us in various systems throughout the ages. But if we think about what Einstein used to do, Einstein used to have a problem, so he would be working on his problems, and he would write, whenever he got stuck, he would write them up on the board. And then he would sit there and he would hold a ball in his hand, and he would sit in front of the blackboard holding the ball in his hand, and he'd just stare at it until he dozed off to sleep. And so then he would doze off to sleep, kind of staring at the problem on the blackboard. And as he dozed off to sleep and dropped into sleep, his hand would uncurl, he'd drop the ball, it would wake him up, and he would have the answer to his problem. Now, if this is not a process for tapping into your own source of divine creativity and medicinal artistry, I don't know what is. And so this speaks to something that the author of The Courage to Create talks about in extensive detail. And what he talks about is we often think about being in a state of flow, and that, creativity is something that, I think we're all familiar with the idea of this creativity coming from a divine source or us acting as a channel. But there are these two sides of the coin that have to take place. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. So people don't tend to be creative in things that they've never thought about before. So the balance, Rollo May, that's it. Is that how you pronounce his name? Is it Rollo or is it Rollo? I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Looks like Rollo, so I'm happy to go with that. Yeah.
We're Aussie, so it's Rollo, mate. He talks about the idea that, there has got to be a level of energy and action and attention put into something. So this is the contemplation of it. And this is one of the reasons why in this container of remembrance, I offer these kind of tools, and we come at it and we put in the work by like listening to us talk and kind of contemplating action, actively is the word I'm looking for, actively reading through these ideas, thinking about these ideas, and bringing them to the forefront of our mind. And then there is the process of like being in this state of just bewildery and being in this state of allowing, so that we can allow things to emerge from that state. And so he talks about, put the work in, do your due diligence in the area in which you want to work, in the area in which you create. But remember that it must be balanced from moving into the opposite side of the brain and moving into the playful state, moving in and doing something else, because there is something that happens when we allow ourselves to be in these two different states, actively working on the thing that we want to move towards, but then also resting from it and doing something else, usually with our body or like in a playful way, or movement, or just being in a completely different state or place, that then allows the subconscious to bring forth the next steps, or the parts that our conscious mind couldn't fill in from that place of what we are inquiring into. Does that make sense? I'm not articulating my words very well this morning. But this is we want to have the two sides of the coin. And so just trying to do all the things. Again, this is this movement from the masculine to the feminine, this movement from the productivity into the, that state of rest and regeneration. And this is why this regenerative cycle of the natural world is so important. When we're going through it in our monthly cycle, when we're going through it in the cycle of the year, but even just on a day-to-day basis, allowing ourselves to come into that restful state where so that things can emerge. We can be in a state where we can receive whatever information is there for us to receive. And this ebb and flow of doing and non-doing is how we really tap into this creative aspect of ourselves. So I might just go through the 5 acts of the divine. How are we going for time? Yes. Like Abraham Hicks, the vortex. Yeah, totally. Absolutely. I've read a little bit of Abraham Hicks. Do you want to tell us a little bit? Give us a short little recap of the vortex, Becky, because I feel like my words are a little bit jumbled this morning. So I'd love to have us come from another angle. Do you want to tell us about it?
Well, yeah, it's Abraham Hicks. It's kind of like the power of manifestation. Yeah. It's sort of like the power of manifestation, but the same kind of process that you're sort of thinking about is that you focus on what it is that you want, and then you, I suppose, believe in the receival of it. So you sort of sit in that, and what I'm getting from what you're saying is that you then just kind of relax back and sort of feel into what it feels like to receive that. And so what Abraham Hicks sort of talks about is that what you want is already in the vortex. So, you know, what it's about kind of, I suppose, I'm not going to say it very eloquently either, but it's about manifesting. And so what you want and what your desires are already there. So they're in the vortex, they're there waiting for you. So it's about allowance and allowing them to come through you. So obviously there is some action to take to get in that direction. So obviously you need to be aligned with what it is that you want, but you don't need to specifically pull action in. You need to be able to sit back and I know he's going, it's okay, go say goodbye. So yeah, and so it's just about sort of allowing it to come through as well.
Yeah, beautiful.
Sorry, I'm not also very, but I've got
No, that's
a lot of
fine.
people wanting
Great.
me at the moment.
And it is, Rollo May talks about it being as where it's an encounter, when these moments of divine inspiration come in, that it's an encounter, you know, like that we allow ourselves to be in that state. And has anybody read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert? It's a wonderful book. It's a really easy read, but it's a really, really wonderful book. And she talks about the creative process as, or anything that we wish to create in our lives, that it's just entities moving through us, that these ideas exist in the field. And so she tells a great example of Tom Waits, when a song was coming to him, and, you know, he'd be driving and the song would come. And he saw creativity as like an entity that was coming to him. And so like the song came and he's driving. And so he'd be like, I can't write you right now. I'm driving. You're going to have to come back to me at a better time. I'm really loving what you're putting out right now, but this is not the time. Please come back to me at a time that I can give you my attention. And then I will write you. And it would. The song would come back. This creative entity, this divine entity that wanted to be birthed into the material world would come back. And she also talks about, you know, like having the idea for a book, but we don't, like, again, this is this traditional idea of creativity, but this can be anything that we want to create in our lives, that it's all entities that want to kind of move through us. And so she talks about everybody has a creative genius. And often we can say, oh, I'm not creative. Oh, I could never birth that. I could never create that. I could never write that. I could never come up with that meal. I could never think about running my household in that way. I could never think about putting my outfit together in that way. But if we take ourselves off the hook by getting rid of the idea that it's all up to us and playing with this idea that we have creative geniuses, like there's these geniuses, and this derives from a Latin word. I can't remember what the word is. So it's not necessarily genius in the way that we think of it as in the modern context. It is, I'll put a picture of the book in the group. But it's like this entity that wants to be birthed. And so it's not up to us to figure it out. It's just up to us to follow the flicker. And so the flicker or the breadcrumb or that little tap on the shoulder that's like, why don't you make this? Or why don't you do it this way? Or why don't you write this? Or why don't you create this course? Or why don't you do this? That's that little tap on the shoulder by the genius. And it's not your responsibility to say whether it's good or bad or whether you have the capacity to do it. It's your responsibility to show up so that it can show up and you guys can co-create together. And so she would say that, you know, when the little tap on the shoulder would come for a different book, she would relieve herself of the pressure for it to be wonderful or amazing. She would just honor this creative genius that tapped her in the shoulder and said, I want to be birthed into the world now. And so she would just sit up at her desk and she would wait for it to come. Oh, here you are. Okay, I'm just going to write. And just move through the process that way. And then she tells this great story of how she had this great book that wanted to be birthed, and I can't remember what it was about. A story of let's just say it wasn't this, but let's just say it was a story of this woman living on an island with a particular set of circumstances. And for a while she wrote it, and she wrote all these, parts of this book, and then she kind of stopped showing up, and she put it, I think she had a lot happen in her life. She put it in a drawer and she left it there. And in the meantime, in the middle of this process, she actually met this other writer that she had been a fan of for a while, and they became pen pals and writing to one another and everything. And I think then they finally met for the first time in person. And when they met, one of them gave the other one a kiss on the forehead. Anyway, their relationship carried on, and then sometime later, they were talking about the books that they were writing, and this other writer said to her, I'm writing this book about this woman on an island with this particular set of circumstances. And Elizabeth Gilbert was like, oh my goodness, that's the half-written book that I've got in my drawer. And so what she believed happened is that the creative genius that had come along for her to write the book got sick of being shoved in a drawer for 2 years. And so when she gave Anne this kiss on the forehead, it went, I'm going off to this lady because she's going to see me through. She's going to release me out into the world. And so it's just such a beautiful illustration of the fact that there are all these ideas and ways of doing things and things that want to be brought into the world, and they may be great and impact thousands of people, or they may be small and subtle and impact your daughter or your brother or your mother and just give them a moment of joy and pleasure. And it's not up to us to decide whether the great thing that impacts thousands of people or the little thing that impacts just one in a way that we might not even ever know is better or worse or of any higher value or of any less value. That isn't up to us. But when we have these creating the conditions in which we can be this clear channel to start to allow our lives to move through us in a more creative way, that's all that's up to us, and to be authentic and true to that process. So I will go through the 5 acts of the divine, but it just feels a bit more in the flow to mention The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. Becky, have you done The Artist's Way?
I haven't. I read the first bit.
Yeah.
And I got kind of stuck there.
Yeah. Well, it's a great book to do. So The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron is a process for artistry. And it's like, it's a book form where in each chapter is a different theme, and it's got journal prompts and everything like that. But the biggest take home that I think that most people get from The Artist's Way is the morning pages. And so the morning pages are 3 pages of stream of consciousness writing, where you just give yourself 3 pages to get whatever is out on paper. The point of these morning pages is not for them to be a work of art. It's not for them to be positive. It's not for them to be a gratitude practice. It's none of that. It's just to write. And so often for morning pages, it might be, I fucking hate morning pages. I'm not in the mood for doing morning pages. I don't even know what to write. I've got nothing to write. Like, there's nothing there. But if you think about if we are clogged creatively and we feel like we don't know what to do, like just to get things flowing again. And it's amazing what happens when you do morning pages. I do find it really hard at my stage of life to get to my morning pages, and I have had a bout of doing it since I've had Luna, but I wasn't able to maintain it just at this stage of life. And I've had so many kind of good stints of writing morning pages, and it is just the clarity that comes from just having an outlet for moving everything through. And sometimes ideas come within the morning pages, but sometimes it's just completely separate of morning pages. Like just it opens something up. It's like it opens the channel up to that divine creative consciousness, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
The morning pages is exactly where I got stuck.
Is it? Yeah. Well, so there's other ways that you can do it. She's got another book called Vein of Gold, and this is something that Cedar and I do occasionally, and it's a really beautiful practice to have so she recommends like just having these practices that move you. This is what I'm talking about, to come into the state of encounter. So to allow things to approach you, because if we're doing all the time, like this is, if we come back to our 3 pillars of remembrance, like this first one is love, to be in a state of love and inquiry. And this is the inhale breath. This is to be in that state of encounter so that things can move towards us. And if we if you think of like our creative aspirations or our creative solutions for problems that we might be experiencing or challenges that we're going through, if you can think of these like geniuses, these little geniuses that are the creative responses and the creative ways that we can, become artists of our own life. If we're doing all the time, like a timid little puppy, if we're just constantly like, where is the space for them to be like, oh, she seems safe to approach? So we've got to like consciously find ways to move back into this state of encounter and to move into this state of like love, open receptivity, and to this state of bewithering. And then we start to go into second pillar, this nature, where we're in energetic conversation, energetic communication with the living world around us, but also the ideas that are coming through us. And so one of my issues has been, I've never, ever experienced a lack of ideas. I've always had these grand visions of things that I can do when like, I'm going to create that and I'm going to create that, and like big plans and all of that kind of thing. But then what happens is I don't ground in my body enough. Well, this is what I've learned about where the gaps in my own creative process are, is that then I'm like, right, I'm going to do that. Like it basically comes in and I'm like, I'm going to do that, without allowing it to come deeply into my center of being and to sit in relationship and communication with this idea, so that I can allow it to then emerge from me and then see all of the places in my life where these threads can be woven together. I'm just going, and so what happens is I get the idea and then believe that I have to do everything. And so I go straight into that then third pillar of creation, the action that needs to be taken without waiting for the ways that source energy or the ways that the universe is going to show up to co-create with me, to guide me on the path. And so the end result can end up looking quite different from the original idea or genius that came through, particularly when we allow ourselves to be in communication and co-create with that energy. And it's something that I am seeing now come full circle in my life, in that, 10 years ago, I founded a business called Little Branches, Big Trees, that had all these big visions of what I wanted to create and where I wanted it to go. But like, I just went full throttle into trying to make it happen. And I'm going to do this, I'm going to call this person and blah, 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 without like sitting in relationship with it and just letting the intelligence of that being, that creative being that wanted to be birthed into the world, move through me. So there was no embodiment with it on my part. And so this is a really important part of the practice. And just in the unfolding of our lives, just moving back body, embodiment, relationship, listening, all of these things that we're talking about, and then pulling in there's a thread. Then we see the breadcrumbs. We see the path emerge. It's supposed to happen that way. Then this other person, comes in. They're going to help me learn that. And it's way more beautiful than we could ever do with our conscious mind. But it's not, our culture doesn't teach us this process, because it's all about doing, and we got to make things happen, and like biohack our way to like greatness, and make life happen for us. And so just falling back into this a little bit more. So I just want to briefly go through the 5 acts of the divine. There's actually a whole masterclass on this that I made called Creatrix, that I'll put a link up to as well, so that you can watch that if you're interested in that. So in Tantra, we talk about the 5 acts of the design. You're raising your hand, Becky. How formal. Go for it. What would you like to say?
I know. I had to be formal because otherwise it was going to come out as a massive... and I'm just sharing this because it feels like I need to. While you were talking about that, the big trees, little branches, I got the biggest hit of about a minute's worth of deja vu, where it feels like I've heard this before. Like, it's like, here's a pin in this moment. This means something. So I just wanted to let you know that I think...
It's not because I did a reel about it the other day.
No, I don't think I saw the reel about that. No, it's it was definitely, it wasn't a memory, it was definitely deja vu. So I just wanted to put a pin here and just say this is a turning moment.
Cool.
That's all. Sorry.
Well, if you haven't, I might just share a little, before we go into the 5 acts of divine, I might just give a very brief rundown of what's happened recently. So Little Branches, Big Trees was my first business. Kathy was a big part of it. And so the idea, it was born out of the Abbey in Glebe on Bridge Road, which was a $6 million property, this old dilapidated Presbyterian church that was stunning. And it was really run down at the time that I was living there. And I used to go and hang out at this church. And I could see how this old church could become this like hub for like yoga and health and well-being and permaculture, and like be this place that brought people back into connection with themselves and the land and community and growing their own food and everything like that. And I used to buy lottery tickets to try and buy this place, and then I was going to put this center on it and everything like that. And then it started off much more modest than that. I moved to Wollongong. I got a little studio space, and we started running permaculture workshops and yoga, and I had a homeopathic clinic there as well, and whole food cooking workshops and everything. But it was always just me, like I pulled in other teachers to come and teach things, and I was always trying to get people to understand, like, I thought if I could bring in the yogis and bring in the permies, that like somehow I could weave the two of them together, and people would like understand like that we need to take care of nature and like go back, like return to this sacred connection with the land. And there was so much like energy in it that I was so burnt out by the end of it. And we even tried to the end result was like, we tried to get a DA approved to move the studio into a old petrol station. We were going to call it Petrol to Permaculture, and like have a permaculture demonstration site, extend the yoga studio and live on site. And anyway, it was madness. I fell pregnant in the midst of an 8-month thing with council and ended up just crying, going, I don't want to teach people how to meditate and grow their own food. I just want to go to the country and meditate and grow my own food. And so that's what we did. Anyway, and now like letting the studio go, like Yoga Vidya go, and letting a lot of things go, and now starting to study plant medicine and the spirit of the plants and how we communicate with plants. I'm realizing that people are so hungry for that relationship. And it's made me understand that that relationship is the connecting point for what I've been trying to work with my whole life, and what I've like the work of my life kind of thing. And then what's emerged is an old permaculture garden that a friend of mine designed 20 years ago, has not been tended for the last 3 or 4 years. And I'm now going to become the new custodian of that garden, with his support in pulling in the goodwill of the garden to have a massive working bee and resurrect this garden. But this can be, because I was looking for a place where I could host meditation and plant medicine circles and spring medicine making and things like that in the garden, in the place where these plants are growing, and facilitate more communication between nature, between humans and plants. And I'm like, like it had to be more humble than what I was trying to do in the beginning. And now I can see that for ages it felt like my work with Little Branches, Big Trees had been lost, and that vision was lost. And now I'm starting to see how it was never lost. It was all part of the journey to just find its way in, for it to emerge in a much simpler way, because I don't have to do everything. And in fact, I can't do everything. And the potency of my work will be found from a place of me handing over and more working with what is, and connecting with people and co-creating with the material world, with other people, and with that divine source energy in a way that doesn't match what my logical mind can come up with. And so it's been really beautiful before we have this subject to have a really big kind of like full circle realization of this process in action. But that's happening, like permaculture teaches us that we design from patterns to details. And so what is happening, like this is a bigger kind of pattern of what happens every day, like just in these little acts of creation, within our homes, within our relationships, within our work life. So it's happening, and then we can, when we start to see the patterns, then we can creatively respond and tweak the details. And that's when we feel more in flow with like the life that we are creating and the way that we're responding to what's happening in our lives. So yeah, I'm going to go, no, you know what? I'm not going to go through the 5 acts of God, because it's a whole another can of worms. We've got 5 minutes left. There's a whole masterclass on it. So I'm just going to put that up in the masterclass section. And you guys can watch it in your own time. You could just put it on like a podcast. You don't need to see what's happening in it. So you don't need to sit down and watch it. like any of these modules for most of the time. So I might just hand over and see if there's any questions or reflections, and yeah. Oh, before I didn't actually end up finishing what I was saying about the other ways. So there's the morning pages, but there's also this process of going for a walk, having a day, like she recommends going out daily and getting out in nature and walking, but she recommends one day a week having a creation walk. And the creation walk is just where you walk. You could do it with another person, or you can just do it by yourself. I do it with Cedar. Wouldn't you just walk anywhere, preferably somewhere in nature that's beautiful, but wherever you can, and you walk. Because I mean, we've probably all heard about the idea that people do walking meetings now, because it, like, when we're in our body, we're like moving more into that state of encounter. Oh, wouldn't it be amazing if, I would so love it if, imagine if we could go on a holiday to here, or imagine if I could figure out a way to get all the kids' lunches done, and I also get prepare meals for myself, but it doesn't feel like a giant task. Imagine if I could find a place where I could run these circles. Imagine if, like, and so you just, what if? Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if? And you're just allowing your mind to go into all the things that it would be wonderful if they could materialize in your life, with no attachment, no strings, no like, I want this, no grasping, just letting your mind think about all the things that would be wonderful to experience, taste, see, do, bring into your life, whatever. And it's such a beautiful game to play with yourself, and it brings you into that playful state that is conducive to problem solving, that is conducive to creative responding and creative thinking. And yeah, and I mean, it ends up getting really silly with Cedar and I, like, imagine if the lake was actually made of jelly, and we could, like, it goes into all these crazy places, but it's so playful. And it's a really good way to switch him in if he's in a bit of a like state. It's a really good way to, like, get us both out of it. So yeah. All right, reflections, questions. What comes up for you with all of this? Does this land?
I'd say it lands absolutely beautifully. I didn't really know what I was hoping to get out of this module, but I've definitely got what I hoped for without knowing what I hoped for. That makes it 1 iota of sense that I'm doing well. But the Artist's Way, much like you, Becky, I started that, quite a while ago. Morning pages, awesome. I really benefited from them, but for reasons I can't explain, I just tailed off from there. So maybe it wasn't the right time, but, or maybe I just wasn't in the right space, but I feel like I am now. And I've got the book, I can see it, it's on my shelf right there. So I've got a renewed sense to dive back into that. And Kelly, just hearing you talking about little branches, I started to get a bit misty. Still go past where it used to be. Obviously the building's not even there anymore, but such amazing memories. And that's how I met you, of course. And now living right in Corrimal, and I see it all the time. And I'm so happy that you've sort of come full circle in that way, and in a really peaceful, lovely way as well. So yeah, I look forward to being on this journey a bit more with you, hopefully. So
yeah, thank you. I mean, a peaceful way, as you said that, I just got a huge image of all the work there is to be done in the garden. It's so overgrown, and it's going to be a massive, like, there's going to be some grunt and some full-on action. But yes, it is definitely, yeah. And I'm excited to invite you guys into it.
from
What I'm kind of on fire now. Like, I'm feeling really juicy. But it just reiterated to me that, like, in this instance, it's showing that little Big Trees, Little Branches has been in your vortex the whole time. And it's just a matter of the timing and allowing that to happen. And as soon as you said a lot of work to do, I'm like, hey, Troy and his whole family are avid gardeners.
Yeah.
Do a working bee. Get people to come in and clear it in one foul swoop.
There is a huge working bee being planned, and everybody will know about it.
Yeah, let us know. We're there.
Yeah, so hold tight. And the first one will be like, we just need grunt, you know, and then there'll be working bees once a month. It'll go back to having working bees once a month, like the garden used to have. And then it's a potluck working bee. Everybody comes and eats in the garden and everything like that. It's a really beautiful place to be. So yeah. All right, I think we've lost Brooke at some point. All right, well, it is 9:30, so we might close up unless there's anything else. We're all good. All right, ladies, well, I'd love to hear any reflections that come up over the next couple of weeks around this. And will you both make the circle, the in-person circle?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I
Please.
definitely.
Yeah.
Sorry, I meant part of that, but life went stupid and I didn't. So sorry.
No, that's okay. Great. All right, I need to just confirm numbers. So, all right, let's take a breath just to finish. Take a deep breath in. Hold yourself full of creativity and love and beauty and inquiry and curiosity and playfulness. And release. And I will see you in the chat. Have a beautiful day, lovelies. Bye.
Bye.